right, folks, welcome back to Talkin Badgers. And, after a week off, we got a jam-packed show for you tonight. Got my guy Ryan Allers here with me. And, it looks like the tides might just be turning here in Madison after a rough couple of weeks. Wisconsin now sits at 4-2 after back-to-back blowout wins, including today's 42-7 dominant performance on the road over Rutgers. Complementary football is on full display. Offense, defense, special teams, all clicking. Haven't seen a lot of that in the Luke Fickell era. You're starting to see real signs of growth under Coach Fickell. It's not perfect, but we got plenty to talk about. So let's dive in here. Ryan, we've both sat here, over the course of the season and maybe even a lot of last season, and we've been plenty critical of Phil Longo. And if we're going to sit here and be fair, the last 2 weeks have been really different. And over the last two games, they've combined for 94 points. That's the most, in a 2-game span since 2020. So what are your thoughts on what you saw today from the offense?
It's just a remarkable turnaround. At some level, I know you have to take opponents into consideration, and we played, Buns U and Ass U the last 2 weeks, two teams that are not obviously good at all. But that's what you're supposed to do against good teams. Or against bad teams. You're supposed to just smash them at your will. This is exactly what I was calling for against South Dakota and Western Michigan. That's what made me nervous, and I think all of Badger Nation was nervous, is because we were wondering year 2 is when it's supposed to take an ascent. I think we're climbing in the altitude now. I think we were dinking around, circling, not sure what we were doing, but whatever Phil Longo's doing, he is in his bag. When he went to, I know you and I and the rest of the boys, especially Jay was rock hard when he went under center, I formation. I think the entire state of Wisconsin just moaned when they saw that.
That's the way to just instantly, get a little bit of goodwill again, right? Absolutely necessary. Knowing your target audience.
One play, brother. That's all we need. Just give us one, and it's just all right, he knows his roots. That if you remember from the last couple pods, that's what I was like. You can tell me about the numbers. You can tell me about shotgun and the air raid of going for it on 4th and 1 from the. Call me a million-year-old dinosaur. I don't like it. That's the play you run on 4th and 1. Now I know earlier in the game they went on 4th and 1 and got a touchdown, but it is Rutgers. But I'm saying you go to that where you have 5-6 offensive linemen in there. That was I formation, and Tyree Walker wasn't even touched. You had 11 guys in the box, and he didn't get touched. To me, just bricked up.
Like you said, that's exactly what it's got to look like against, no disrespect to Rutgers, because I'll be the first to admit I was not overly optimistic coming in today. Jumping out early on Rutgers is obviously the formula. That if you get them in a negative game script, they're not built to come from behind. Kade McCarty, not a good thrower of the football.
Remind the audience that might not be on Twitter. What was your line about Kade McCarty being a quarterback?
Gosh, I don't even know. I was saying a lot of dumb shit throughout the game. I found it here. I just put the main thing holding Kade McCarty back from being a good quarterback is his complete and utter inability to throw the football. So other than that, though, he's the complete package. So
I was on my couch with my kid. Good pop out of me on that one.
I don't know, man. He was brutal. I think we got him in a negative game script early, which was huge, and allowed Wisconsin to play this version of complementary football and Phil Longo's offense. I mean, today we outgained Rutgers 549 yards to 271, 309 rushing yards on the ground, 240 passing yards. You just love to see that. Dominated the time of possession. Braden Lock's interception. Really questionable ball, but I also understand, to me anyway, but I understand why he maybe was feeling himself a little bit. I think we should talk about it a little bit. I think we're kind of on the same page. Prior to even last week's game, Vinnie Anthony is somebody who I, kind of want to bang the drum for a little bit. I don't think this is someone you're going to sit there and target 7, 8, 9 times a game, but he's a legitimate deep threat. He's got track speed out there, and this is 3 games in a row now where we're starting to see it. And, to Braden's credit, he delivered a couple of nice balls, and he's also more willing to push the ball downfield. And that's where I want to give him his flowers. So I don't know. I was really, really pleased with just overall, running and throwing the ball, it was really nice to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Like, I don't know. Well, at some level, I agree and disagree. I disagree about targeting that much. If he's going to make those plays, you better find 7 to 8, 9 targets until he shows he can produce at that level. Because every time you throw him the ball, like if you look at the USC game, and I know we were talking about how like we don't want to go back too far in history because this is a reaction part, but if you go back to that USC game, like if there was an MVP award for a half of football, I don't think it's Vinnie Anthony. I don't think it was close. He had the long
100%.
pass. He had a fumble recovery. Like he makes impact plays when he's on the field. We saw it in spring. We saw it in fall. And I think that's kind of where I've been kind of frustrated with the staff, where it's like you see a lot of the young guys like that are balling. And I think a lot of it comes down to like, why weren't they getting more reps? I think this staff is very, very kind to veteran players for sticking it out. You know, I made that last week. I made that stepdad analogy where it's kind of like, you know, you can't really discipline these kids because you didn't recruit them, or you can't bench them when they're not hurt. Injuries have opened the door for them to make roster moves. Both, you know, Ches was a tough decision, but with Will Pauling get knocked a little bit, Bryson Green, you got a wide receiver one now, and it's Vinnie Anthony. The kid just makes plays every single week. Just even that one where Braden just threw a he down there somewhere ball. Like, I'm fine with that because the ball he missed to Will Pauling early in the first half, that interception and the shot he made it to Vinny, you just got to throw those. Even if you don't get them all, like we were never throwing them. And look at how everything opens up by just completing one pass.
100%. I mean, I think that right there is the biggest point and why Vinnie Anthony is so valuable to this offense as a whole, because, you know, just look at what it did today. Like Tyree Walker, you know, big dog. Like he came out today, 24 carries, 198 yards, 3 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks. He's a vulture. He's a vulture first and foremost. But yeah, it's having that threat over the top to open up the run, which is huge. But also, I think it's getting away from the committee. I'm not going to dive real deep into Ches or anything, but like his departure opened up the door for someone like Tyree Walker, who I think, you know, very clearly can be, when he's healthy, a bell cow for us and somebody that can help control the clock and move the sticks. And he's just a Wisconsin running back. Like, I know that he's a 1-year rental, but he sure don't feel like it. He feels like he's in the right place. Want to shout out the offensive line. That looked like a Wisconsin offensive line. I just going to leave it at that. There were some gaping holes today. Tawi took advantage of them. You love to see it. You know, Darian Dupree today, you know, obviously I think that they've got it right in him being, you know, the number 2. He was not overly efficient with the ball in his hands between the tackles, but it's not exactly who he is. I'm not saying he can't do that, but when you get him the ball in space, he made some plays on his, you know, his catches there. But I feel like it allows them to settle into real roles, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of an identity here, a little bit. And I think Tawi and, you know, just having a deep threat, those couple little things. I'm starting to see the vision a little bit, and that much I appreciate, because it was a long time I couldn't say that.
No, you're 100% right. It's like, are we power team? Are we a finesse team? Are we a none of the above team? It seems like they're really starting to get it. And I don't know if it's necessarily the youth movement, but I think it took 17 games, but it finally feels like a team. And I know it's only 2 games, and I know it's Purdue, and I know it's Rutgers, but we didn't have this against Buffalo. We didn't have it against Georgia Southern. We didn't have it against Northwestern last year, who was surprisingly better than we thought. We didn't have it against Indiana, who beat us last year before and then fired their coach 4 games later. So it's like, it's not like they were the juggernaut that they appear to be on that week schedule now. But man, it feels like we got a team. Like, is it the best team? No. Is it a horrible team that we were like questioning whether we had the right coordinators? No. Like Ryan Herring's always said on Lockdown Badgers, like, it's never as high as it's going to be. It's never as low as it's going to be. But we never knew where it was within here. We would go from high to low to high to low because we had no median point to settle at. We got that median point. Hey, we got some studs, dude.
I think you're exactly right on that. I think that's why we as fans have been it's been such a roller coaster ride, because there's basically been no middle ground. You know, we haven't seen them win playing like fine football, or I don't know. We haven't, it's either, I mean, there hasn't honestly been a lot of really good. We've been getting that recently, but we've never even really been able to see the vision. And again, opponents aside, like you have to be able to do these kinds of things against inferior opponents. So I'm not getting nothing from this. I'm not all of a sudden going to sit here and say, hey, we're on track for 8 wins. Like, I'm not ready to take those leaps. But
Well,
I absolutely want to sit here and say that, like, I'm willing to have a discussion. I would say I'm trending cautiously optimistic about this team, and somebody specifically that I want to give some love to that, didn't get a chance to last week is Braden Locke. I've been plenty critical of him over the time, but like, I ultimately I want the kid to succeed as much as anybody. I will never root against any Wisconsin Badgers player, period. And he's done some really nice things and appears to be playing a lot more confidently, starting to settle into this role a little bit. Phil Longo talked about all the checks he made last week that were, positive. And I think Braden's really starting to settle into the role, and he's looking like a guy, who can potentially get the job done. And just want to give Braden, his flowers, because I thought he had a nice game today and did a really good job orchestrating the offense.
And I'd like to echo that too. Like for me, last year I was all on the Lulu Lock train. And then even in the spring, if you go back and look at some of the notes that I did for Badger Notes or an Avalon, you go back and it's like, I said, this is, and I can pull the quote. I said, this is a real quarterback competition. Braden Locke is a good player. And then it came around to fall camp, and it's like, I think the only thing that I can like rationalize in my mind is he didn't just go from being a decent player to a bad player. I think honestly, as a younger guy, he got in his own head. Like, I got to press, I got to improve press because it's like a lot of the throws I saw in fall camp, it was just pick city after pick city after pick city. And it's like, he probably was pressing to try to get that starting job. But now that there's no real threat to it, he can get comfortable. He can play within himself. And it's like, that's what we've seen the last 2 games. Like even against Alabama, like you could tell at the beginning of the Alabama game, he had pocket awareness issues. Like, yes, Bama has some guys that are a little bit better than Purdue and Rutgers. But like even today against Rutgers, he knew that free runner was coming off the edge and he knew he had to hot it. And he still got it out and then got hit. So it's like he knows it's coming. He knows where the pressure's coming from. That's the biggest thing with quarterbacks is like, yeah, you got to make throws. You got to do all that. But you're the maestro. Like, you got to be able to set protections. You got to be able to hit backs in the flat. And it's just his ability to do that now changes my trajectory on his career arc. And not that, like, we are anybody to say what he can and can't be. But if this Braden Locke stays, I don't know. If this Braden Locke stays, you may be looking for a depth piece at quarterback to help fulfill your room instead of a starting piece to help fulfill your room in the portal.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in saying, like, him not looking over his shoulder, we're seeing a different version. This is his team right now. We knew it was going to be his team. But my confidence in saying that out loud is feeling a little bit different right now. And it's a really positive thing. There's a program that needs to, break that cycle of bringing in transfers. And, it would be wonderful if Braden was the guy, and, there's a lot of season left and we'll see, but you've got to build on it. And that's what he did today. He came out and he built on a strong performance, ran the offense, did some really positive things. And, anytime I'm going to sit here and be critical of somebody, I want to also be fair and, call out when I'm wrong, and also, give a guy their flowers when they do really well. And I think Braden Locke has, he's shown really well the last couple of weeks. And, on maybe a much lesser note, a guy who I think I really love seeing succeed, Kade McCarty. I think that he's just destined, and I think it's right for him to be the number 3 in this rotation, and it might not lead to a lot of opportunity for him. But man, what more, could you ask for from this dude? I think he'd come in averaging over 7 yards a carry, give him 4 totes today for 72 more. I don't know, just really happy for him. He's a guy who stuck through, and, spring ball or going into fall camp, there was 8 scholarship running backs. Obviously things have changed a bit, but could have left. He decided to stay, compete, and get whatever was going to be given to him. And somebody who I'm rooting for when he's out there. So loved kind of seeing him make the most of that opportunity again.
For sure. Every time I watch Kade McCaffrey, pardon me, not Christian McCaffrey, it's Kade Yakameli. So when I watch Kade McCaffrey out there playing football, it's a joy to see. Like when I see him in his interviews and he's wearing a crop top and he looks like the vanilla Zeke Elliott from the Ohio State days, I'm like, this guy for the culture. You know what I mean? When hey, some things don't need to be continued on. Enough is said, right?
You love to see.
Love to see it. Do it for us, brother. But speaking of in the realm of flowers, Mike Tressel, I was unfamiliar with your game, partner.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect pivot point. We got to talk about the defense here because he's somebody who, you know, I wouldn't say I was like souring on necessarily, but you know, I definitely question whether or not they had the personnel, but we've seen some big changes here.
100%. Like for me, I wasn't necessarily souring on. Well, maybe I was. I'd have to go back and watch the tapes. When I get emotional, I say a bunch of crazy things, but I don't know if I necessarily deep down was ever souring on him. I was souring on the 2-4-5, and today, I see the vision. Like I didn't see it necessarily against Purdue because they were so throw that it's like you have to be in that anyway. But if you get a guy like Aaron Witt and Leon Lowry and Pius and especially Darrell Peterson, if they're going to be able to play the run like that, I totally understand why you're going to do a 2-4-5. But when they don't do that, then it's basically you're just putting a little help wanted sign for like anybody wants 7 yards of carry, apply within. But if they're going to play the run like the way they're doing, I don't know if I still like 3 down linemen because I'm an old curmudgeon. But if they're going to play like this, where they're going to set the edge, stifle the run, gap fill, like 2-gap it the way they're doing. Because like even when you see Peterson on the edge, he tackled that back, which is an NFL back. He tackled him a couple times for either no gain or just very minimal gain, and he's responsible for 2-gapping it, like between the C gap and the edge. And it's just like
I thought they were really. I thought they were really disciplined today in their run fits and filling gaps, and like they were just so much more assignment sound. There were a few where I feel like, you know, maybe in earlier games you would have seen a guy try to make a play when that wasn't necessarily his responsibility, and that kind of left the next guy out to dry. And I didn't see a lot of that today. I didn't see a lot of missed tackles. I felt, I don't know. I mean, they've given up 13 combined points over the last 2 games, and that's the best since November, a November stretch in 2021. You know,
is death row back?
I'm not willing to take that leap, but I do think that I do think that there are some dudes in that linebacker room. Christian Allegro he's a guy, man. He just is. You know, I understand there's a lot of guys that need to see the field in some capacity. He's somebody who I'd be plugging in first and figuring out the rest behind that. You know, I understand that, you know, sometimes when you're that athletic, sometimes it can lead to, you know, some mistakes. But man, I'm willing to live with him. I think he's special. I think, you know, Tackett Curtis is another guy that has a really bright future here. You know, we haven't really seen him, but Thomas Heiberger. Like, I think there are guys here that I think we can get back to a really, really strong group. But I'm just so impressed with what they've done the last 2 weeks. And again, like people are going to point to the opponents, and I hear that. I think that's the caveat we just need to say out loud is, yeah, everything we're saying is going to be with a grain of salt, but this is what happened today. You know, they handled business that was in front of them. That's something they weren't doing early in the season. They didn't handle business against Western Michigan. Like, they didn't handle business against these other teams, and we're seeing progress. That's what matters to me. I don't even necessarily care. I do care, but like, their end record at the end of the season is not ultimately the most important thing to me. It's that I see them taking steps and improving as a football program, and I'm starting to see a little bit of a vision here, and that's important. You know, I want to shout out a guy like Preston Zachman today at 10 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. He's made a living on being in the right place at the right time. Another interception. Like, I don't know. Just, I saw some really positive things out of the defense today. It's feeling somewhat sustainable. We're going to find out in the coming weeks what exactly that means, what exactly that looks like. But you have to outmatch teams like this, you know, to establish where we actually are in this pecking order in the Big Ten. Because a few weeks ago, I'm just going to say they've changed my opinion in the last 2 weeks of maybe where they fall in that pecking order in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like, I agree with what you said, but a lot of it is like, I've been telling folks like my litmus test is Iowa. Like that's the progress point for me, because Rutgers, I mean, it is what it is. Purdue, it is what it is. But I think like you come out and you take care of Iowa, who like we could play quarterback and they're still going to hold you to set. Like you're still probably going to be in a dogfight. I mean, I could hand off 35 times a game and then throw 7 dirt balls also. But if we play them well, I think my optimism, not only for the rest of November, because that's the first game in November, how we finish the season gives a whole different context. Because I think we look at it now like, yeah, we're looking at Northwestern like should be a win, but we also had 3 points through the game last year. So I mean, in the Big Ten, just like they say with the SEC, like in these 2 leagues, nothing is guaranteed. But I think you get to that Penn State game 5-2. We'll see how it goes. But the rest of the table, you could still be looking at 9-3, 8-4, 7-5. But I think that game and first game in November, I think if you get to that Penn State game and you're 5-2, let's say you're 6-2 or 5-3, that November stretch is going to tell us a lot about this program going forward, because the chances of making a bowl game at that point are very likely. But just how can you maximize your ceiling?
Yeah, right. At this point, I'm gonna just remain very week to week with this program on my takes. I don't. It's hard for me to look too far forward because I have this really large sample size of what they don't do well. And so I would say at the very least, like I've been hurt and I'm guarded. I got my walls up a little bit here, Ryan. And so I'm afraid to make any bold proclamations based on this. But coming into this game, what I need to see was them build on a really strong performance against a dog shit Purdue team. And they did that today. They did that against a much better opponent. Rutgers is the kind of team that we should be beating, like this for the most part. But coming into this, I wasn't particularly confident, and I'm really glad to have been really wrong on that one. I mean, we've played Rutgers 6 times, Ryan. 6 times we've played Rutgers. We are 6-0. We have outscored them 234-51. So
is that good?
It kind of seems good. I'm no math magician, so it's hard for me to say, but I'm really glad to see. It just felt like, maybe in some ways it still does, but we've been falling in this Big Ten pecking order, and I don't know what tier I think we're in at this point. I don't have a clue, but I'm open now. I don't feel like we are going to be maybe in that bottom tier, and I feel a lot better about that. I do feel like a bowl game is possible, where I really didn't 2 weeks ago. I really didn't. And I'm not willing to say that like I think a bowl game is a guarantee. I'm not willing to say really anything. I'm going to stay week to week with them right now, and I need them to continue showing me who they are, and that I need them to change my mind fully. I gave them a lot of blind faith over the year and a half here, but they're starting to win me back over. I'm trending towards cautiously optimistic, and I think Braden Locke is a big piece of that. He's done some nice things, but we've had a great Wisconsin defense for a long, long time, and I'm not going to say we have a great defense, but it wasn't looking anything special early, and they've really turned a corner too.
Yeah, and to that end about taking it week to week, I don't even think that's not ignorant. That's not disrespectful. I think that's the reality of college football. I was just kind of looking off to the side here, and you can make the argument that every team is like this. Look at a team. So we've been kind of back and forth on this team. Like, what are they going to be? Imagine if we were Alabama fans. You lose last week to Vandy, and I'm checking the score here. They beat South Carolina at home, a 3-3 South Carolina at home, 27-25. And if my math is mathin', they were trailing in the fourth quarter. Yeah, so they were almost back-to-back losses to unranked opponents as the number 1 team last week. So I think this is so much. This isn't a week-to-week Wisconsin team. This is a week-to-week sport.
It is. I mean, the transfer portal, I feel like, a lot of people, and I understand both sides, a lot of people hate the transfer portal for a lot of reasons, and this isn't to combat that, but it's introduced parity to the sport because it's allowed a school like Vanderbilt to go out and, take from some lower level. Like everyone's getting a little bit more experienced. And, it's kind of like something like during local media day this past week, Greg Gard was talking about like that there's really all of the data suggests all of the best teams that they've had are when they were experienced. Well, it's not like that's not reinventing the wheel, but with the portal, you can stay old now. Like there are new ways to get old and stay old. And well, it might not be
it might not be
the
your old
that I would prefer. It is introducing parity into the sport, and I think it's raising the floor of some of these major conferences. And you're right. Like I think college football is a week-to-week sport, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So it's the part of the sport that I never want to lose.
No, 100%. I think the week to week is like you almost have to do that to like combat roster attrition, right? Like you might have guys that haven't played a lot and they're getting experience in there. And for that kind of a segue back, I just want to talk about one play in this game that I absolutely loved. And I want you to hear me out before you think I'm an ignorant a-hole. But do you remember the play when Kevin Haywood was in there at left tackle for Jack Nelson and he just got absolutely murdered?
I do.
I love that play so much. I love that he got embarrassed. And here's why. You're not going to tell me that in a like that wasn't meaningless snaps at the end of the game where he was in there with the starters. You're telling me he's not going to look at that film and be embarrassed and be twice the player next week? His preparation's going to go up. He might do a couple extra lifts because of that. Like that move right there for a true freshman is going to benefit him so much. So as soon as I saw that, I kind of laughed and my 11-year-old son was like, "Why are you laughing? He just got murdered." I was like, because I know. Well, first of all, you could tell he was setting up for like either a swim or a spin and then just got bull rushed. And I looked at my son who plays tackle football. I said, he's going to be better for that because he's going to have to watch that film with Coach Blas, who's doing a great job of the offensive line. Everyone keeps saying we want more. It's me on the leader of the Kevin Haywood bandwagon. Like play him. Like that highlight is going to be living in his head all week. So if he gets on the field versus Northwestern, please hide your children. He is going to be looking to commit felonies against somebody because he's going to want to erase that tape and he's going to be better for that. So I'm happy that he got murdered because I know we're going to get the benefit of it at the end.
You're spot on. I mean, in Purdue, he got to play a ton of meaningful football, and how valuable is that? And then today, and I don't know if Jack Nelson was removed with potentially still having some lingering injury issues that he's battling through or not. It really doesn't matter the reasoning. But Kevin Haywood got to play more meaningful Big Ten football today. And I'll be honest, as a whole, he has not looked outclassed. And this is a true freshman. I think you're spot on. He's going to be better for it. The staff is finding ways to not just him, but a lot of the young guys get them opportunities because there really are some talented pieces that are freshmen on this roster. And there's a reason that people were as excited about 24 recruiting classes they were, because there's some high-end talent, and this is a program that is currently devoid of a lot of that. But I think Kevin Haywood is going to be a dude, and I think he's going to be starting for us next year, one more year, and then maybe league. Hard to say, but I think he's got all the tools, and I just love that they're finding a way to get him these snaps now because unfortunately, their shortcomings early in the season didn't allow him to get as many as I think they would have really liked to have given him. So it's nice to see that kind of come to fruition.
Yeah, and it's nice, too, because when you look at it, he was playing left tackle for Jack Nelson. Do you know how many games he played left tackle in high school?
I don't.
0. So as a true freshman playing left tackle in the Big Ten and not getting embarrassed outside of one play as a true freshman, like, put it in my veins, bro. He was I believe, a defensive lineman up until his junior year, and then he flipped over to offensive line and has been exclusively a right tackle. That's why if anybody looks at the depth chart and they wonder why he's a right tackle and not a left tackle, he's played right tackle his whole offensive line career. So the fact that he's hopping in there first off the bench to play left tackle in the Big Ten, hey, I don't know where he's going to finish his career at Wisconsin, but he's got some skill.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the real deal.
He's a 3 and gone.
One last guy I want to shout out, specifically a player, is just Atticus Bertram's. Being a punter, not really, the most glamorous job, but This motherfucker is a weapon for Wisconsin. I don't know. I think last year I didn't hold a real strong opinion of him. Thought maybe we got one of the only Australian punters who didn't have, just a fucking bazooka attached to his leg. And I don't know. He's having a hell of a year. I think he's done a really nice job, and just wanted to shout him out. Thought he had a couple nice ones again today.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Last year he was kicking some into the seats, and we're just like, hey, buddy, like this is still a school. We don't have money for souvenir footballs. Like you got to keep those in the field of play. But he's got this really weird. So I started looking at it. I wish I could give someone credit because I don't know who brought it up. It might have even been on this show. They were talking about his swing release. If you look at a lot of these Australian punters, they're not the traditional swing through the ball. Like punters, when anytime a specialist is going to swing through the ball, you try to lift it as high as you can. He does this thing where his leg will hinge and it stops about halfway. It's like he's punching it. So it gives it this weird end over end. It's like, from what I understand from reading and doing a little research, like that helps with like ball trajectory and muffs. So I think that kind of goes into that kid from USC muffing that kick because it's harder to catch because it's not end over end and it's not a spiral. It's kind of like, you remember in the game when they blocked the field goal and they showed the slow-mo and the ball was, that's what his ball looks like in slow motion. It's like, it's like a bowling ball with spikes. Like, how do you catch that thing? Because of his little punch at the end that he does. He's a weapon, dude.
He is. He's a weapon on a team that needs as many of them as we can find. And I guess maybe that is one of my closing thoughts here is just there's a lot of people that, we've been clamoring for a bit of a youth movement, at least at really specific spots. And obviously you would never wish injury upon anybody. But, Bryson Green going down, Will Pauling, kind of battling through some stuff right now has opened the door for, Tretch Kahuna to be getting more involved. Obviously, Darian Dupree is taking on that number 2 running back role. Braden Locke starting to, fill into his role. Vinnie Anthony starting to step into something. Like, are you buying into this offense turning a corner? Like, I'm not saying being this every week, but are you buying into them turning the corner?
1,000%. You and I both have seen spring practice, and I think a lot of it we were kind of looking like liars for a while because we're like, oh, they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this, and then they come out in the game and it's like, well, that's not what we saw in practice. I'm 1,000% on board. I wish they would go a little more. Like obviously, Will Pauling has had a couple dropsies. Andy got dinged up today. Looked like a concussion. Not speculating. Looked like he got his bell rung. I think they called it upper body, which is sweet hockey term there. We'll just label it whichever region it is. But I would really love to see more. In the preseason, I was calling them slot reapers. I want to see Tretch and Will Pauling out there. And I don't want to get Badger Nation too excited. But if you like Will Pauling and you like Tretch Kahuna, wait till you see Kyan Johnson. He is the best of both. And I'm not trying to put those two down. The pipeline is strong with this youth movement. 22, Kyan Johnson. Just put a pin in it. Circle back in about 12 months, 18 months, maybe the bowl game. You're welcome.
Yeah, I think he's somebody the staff's made it pretty clear that he's got some growing up to do, but there's no shortage of talent. And I don't know that this is like a 1-for-1 comp on my end. It's just something I've been kind of thinking of because he's smaller than him, but he's got like a little bit of a Jaden Reed factor to him where I think he's got some quick twitch. He's not really big, but he's got like some jump ball skills that are legit. And like Jaden Reed's only like 5'10", 5'11", and you see him going up and making those plays. And I think KBJ's got a little bit of that. If he said he's got some growing up to do. The staff's been pretty clear about that, and it's tough when you've got 3 slots that are all, different amounts of dynamic and deserving of being on the field. But yeah, there's something there. Make no mistake about it. That he's very talented. I also think that they might really be onto something here on offense. I mean, it's hard to take a lot away from like a Phil Longo, press conference. Obviously, he speaks and it's coach speak, and it's also very plain coach speak. It's we want to take what the defense gives us, spread them out, make them defend the whole field. We'll eat no shit, like no shit. But we're starting to see what that looks like a little bit, and it's starting to. To the naked eye, to the eye, to whatever, you're starting to see it. It's nice that you can at least see the thought process and how when they actually play complementary football, which Luke Fickell has talked about all season, really since he's been here in Madison. We're starting to see what that looks like. And, maybe, what Locke doesn't bring to the table in terms of arm strength becomes a little bit less important if we truly are making them have to defend the entire field. Vinnie Anthony is opening up some stuff. You got plenty of guys who can do the work underneath. Our tight ends, maybe still leave something to be desired, but they've used Riley Nowakowski as, kind of that H-back a little bit. He's had some really nice blocks. The offensive line is playing well. Things are starting to come together. I appreciate that they've done away with the committee and on offense. I think that's going to be a really big piece of, them having any form of offensive identity. Defensively, I feel like they've turned a corner. I feel like I'd be interested to see snap counts today, but I feel like they've really honed in on the guys they want. And I feel like they're all starting to play a lot better together. Maybe some of that is part of the transfer culture and they're starting to gel, but I don't know. A lot of positive things came out of this, and I'm real happy to sit here and finally say something positive for once. With some tough weeks before that, but any closing thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, so I just wanted to your point quick about the two things that I think are really, really, really impactful is when Braden Locke is the number 2 in practice, when you're running the 2s against the number 1 offense, who's he throwing to? Vinnie Anthony, Tretch Kekahuna, Quincy Burrows. That rapport and that stuff is a lot of the reason why he's finding success. When he came into the game, he's struggling to find Bryson because he's not working on those timing routes because that's what Tyler Van Dyke was doing. And I also wanted to credit a lot of it to Kenny Guyton. Like, obviously, I'm not gonna minimize what Phil Longo's doing. Like, he's answered the bell. He's had an inferno at his feet and hasn't batted an eye. Kept doing what he's doing, and good on him. Like, that's nuts and guts time. Like, respect
Absolutely.
to them. Now, obviously, we're not like a Texas or Bama or anything that's going to like be outside his house asking for him to be fired. But we also haven't been as patient as maybe we could, should, or would have been. But one thing I like about Kenny Guyton, and I don't know if anybody else picks up on this, and I will never try to pretend to be like super coach guy, like inside football. But if you watch the wide receivers, like it's something. Again, I coach 6th grade, but one thing we teach our wide receivers is to step on the toes. That's what we teach them. When you run your route, try to step on the DB's toes. If you watch a lot of the Badgers routes, they are getting so close to the DBs, and then when they shake them, they're getting so much separation. And I don't know if we necessarily saw that last year. A lot of times we saw kind of like rounded cuts because we know a lot of them are timing routes and not necessarily in their option routes, right? So it's like you could run a drag, you could run an arrow route, you can run an out route, depending on how the leverage is. But if you look at 2 plays, one, that Will Pauling one, when he came and flipped and then took off, like that's a timing route. Did they work on that in practice? Sure. But they probably said, hey, if you get that DB to bite, flip your hips and go. Like that's literally a play we run in 6th grade where it's like, if he comes up on you, when you start to settle your hips into your break, spin and go. And that was beautifully thrown, beautiful caught. Another one is Tretch. It was an incomplete pass. But if you remember that one where Tretch was running, he ran up on the DB's toes. And as soon as he got there, he broke out. Now Braden threw it like way over his head, but he had like 6-7 yards of separation there. And it's just like, we have to give credit to Kenny Guyton too, because I didn't see a lot of that last year. It was kind of some vanilla routes, and he's really, really being aggressive on their route concepts, and he gets a lot of credit for getting those guys up to speed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, effectively you call it 2 weeks in a row if you want. I mean, obviously Will Pauling played a good chunk of today, but like you're without effectively your top 2 wide receivers for last 2 weeks, and you had guys that were prepared. They were ready for their moment when they stepped out there, and they've been doing their thing. And I think that's super encouraging. And there are unique ways you can get the football to the couple of playmakers we have. Like last week, they got Tretch the ball in a couple of different ways, and that was huge. But like I've said, I only think there are so many on this roster, and shame on me for maybe not including Vinnie Anthony maybe a little sooner in that. But we're finally getting to see what he's been able to do. They've got some guys, and it's starting to come together. There's some reason for optimism. I would love to see them build on this again. We saw last year when times got tough, this team folded. Say what you. At the end of the year, they won their last 2 games, bowl eligible. They won Nebraska, Minnesota, whatever. But in the heart of the season, there, when times got tough, they kind of folded, and they didn't maybe get the opportunity to string a few together. And I would love to see them be able to do that again this next week, play a strong game, and see what that can turn into, because confidence is a hell of a drug, man. It is. And I want to see what these guys can continue to do with that. And like I said, I'm going to stay week to week with them. But this week and last week too, it's been a lot of fun, man. It has been a lot of fun.
For sure. I think the last kudos I want to throw out there, because I know we got to get out of here, is, well, I'll set it up with some action and then who gets the kudos. So if you notice some of those long plays, like you said, remember, got a couple good runs. Tyree got a good run. A lot of coaches that coach wide receivers would say no block, no rock. Don't underestimate the impact Chris Brooks is having. I don't think he had a ball or a target today, but he is a big, even people were saying he should be a tight end. He was out there on the edge a lot, just destroying corners in the run game. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Chris Brooks, especially in the run game. Just throw him a couple targets, let the big dog eat. But, man, he was mauling dudes. Good on you, Chris Brooks.
100%. I think that's an excellent call out, because any good offense, it takes all 11, man. It's not one person doing any one thing. I think for old time's sake here, it's worth throwing out Ryan. Who's your big dog of the week?
Whew, big dog of the week. Phil Longo. Actually, I'm gonna say the entire. I'm gonna be generic. I'm gonna say the entire coaching staff, because they felt the heat, they felt the pressure. But they did what they had to do, and that's why they get paid the big bucks. They don't listen to us stooges on here thinking we know what's best. They are accountable for what they do, who they play, the record they have. So my big dog is the coaching staff for 2 weeks in a row. Competition is what it is. But for 2 weeks in a row, they put not only a good product on the field, they put their boys in this, they put their young men in positions to succeed. They called a good game plan, and it just felt like we had a different energy. I never want to question the heart of a man, but whatever they did to motivate the boys, they were flying around today. It wasn't any kind of just hit and wrap and 2 yards. No, we are looking for blood. We want murder charges, and that is the football I love to see.
100%. No, I couldn't agree more with that. I love that call out because, like you said, this staff, they've been hearing it, man. Say what you want. Even Luke Fickell admitted his children were telling him about what former players were saying on the internet. Like they've been getting roasted, and they've responded. They've been able to keep everybody together, show progress, keep moving forward. I'm going to give my big dog of the week to maybe our original big dog, Tawi Walker. And I want to acknowledge, obviously, that doesn't come alone. That comes with the big dogs in front of him, doing their eating. But 8 touched. I know this is not just a today thing, but he ran for 198 yards. This is not a burner. This is a guy who was grinding out all of those. Now 8 total touchdowns in the last 3 games. I thought I caught a little nugget as I was walking away from the game that maybe he was the last tailback at Wisconsin who's done that, is Melvin Gordon. He's getting into a rhythm. Big dog's going to eat. I love a JUCO product. I'm going to leave it at that. Tawi Walker is probably my big dog for this week, but there were a lot of people that were deserving, and it's nice to have options. Love it.
That was a great one. That would probably be Cooper's too. He's big dog. He's big dog's big dog.
Yeah, 100%. We'll have Coop weigh in when we come back on Tuesday. But I think you're probably right. All right, folks. I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, thanks for being here, making Talkin Badgers part of your week. Glad we were able to sit down and talk about something positive this week. If you're able, tell someone about the show. Make sure you're subscribed. Catch you back here on Tuesday and on Wisconsin.